talk about something today that seems really simplistic in nature, but it's happening all over. And I think if we kind of bring ourselves back to just this simplistic term of civility in the workplace, it'll help us get along and do our jobs much better. So these are some of the experts that we stole some of these ideas from. Dawn and I put this together, so we're not just experts on the topic, but a lot of people are talking about this kind of stuff these days. So what's civility? What is workplace civility? Anybody got any ideas?
Like how you're supposed to act while you are at work towards other people?
Yeah, that's easy, that's simple. It's getting along, it's respect, it's it encompasses more than just good manners. Etiquette includes behavior that helps preserve norms for mutual respect at work. I think at work, if we remember respect, restraint, responsibility, I always say polite, professional, we'll all get along because we're all here for the same reason. We're here for a paycheck. We're here to support the individuals that we serve, but obviously we're here because we need to support our families or ourselves outside of here. So if we all remember that we're here for the same goal, obviously to support the individuals, but we need this job. If we practice these things, our work lives will be so much easier. So what's incivility in the workplace? Anybody got any examples? Anybody got any ideas of what it is?
Drama.
Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. Sorry, I like to follow my notes so I don't get too far off topic. I'll get 7 slides ahead and then I'll go back, so it's crazy. So it's social behavior lacking in good manners on a scale of rudeness or a lack of respecting or threatening behavior. If you guys have been here long enough, you've heard me talk about harassment in the workplace, bullying in the workplace, all things that are, prevalent. But if we start here at being civil, it won't get to that, because by the time it's at my office or somebody's that upset about working with another coworker, it's usually too late or really hard to repair that relationship to get back to good working grounds. So if we start practicing this here, we're going to be in a better situation. So where have you viewed or experienced severe incivility?
Black Friday.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, just at the store.
It is. It's scary. Like, I think about, going out, and I would not go out on Black Friday. I love to shop. I think it's great. I love a good deal. But if somebody ran me with a cart with a TV...
was mean to me about it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe they should have that TV first. Maybe I don't need it as much. But on second thought, then I'm like, oh, somebody just hit me. Like, it just doesn't show the best side of humanity sometimes. I can talk to my own experience. I was, a couple of weeks ago, we were coming to corporate compliance training. I was driving, and I'm just on time, as I usually am, or close to being late. And I'm driving, and I'm waiting, and I'm at the stoplight, and there's a bunch of traffic, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm getting a little anxious. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm going to be there on time. I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, somebody cuts me off, and then I was like, ooh, I went right through the roof. I was like, what the hell did that ass monkey just do? And I'm like in the car, and I was like, whoa, calm down, sister. Like, whoa, this is not like, but it did. It set me off. But it wasn't, yes, it was that person's fault for cutting me off, but it was my fault for being late. It was my fault for not giving me enough time to get where I wanted to go, because I was anxious because of the fact that I was nervous about where I was going to be on time. Because if that guy just cut me off on a day where I'm just going to the mall, like, hey, I hope he's doing a good thing. Hopefully he doesn't have to go to the hospital. Hopefully it's not an emergency. Your perception changes by what you're dealing with. So thinking about those types of things and being able to control what you can control. But and I was late and I had to say sorry, but I could have had the worst day at work. I could have made everybody in a bad mood, and I could have been like, oh, I was late. But I had to own it, and I had to say, you know what, I'm really sorry. We're going to do this. I'm going to do a reset, and I owe it to my coworkers to be in a good mood, not because I was running late or not because I was mad that I got cut off. So you got to change your mindset. I think that really helps once we get to work. So what causes incivility besides driving when you're late?
Yeah, like politics.
Politics. You turn on the TV every day. Relationships. Anything. These are I call these the external factors. Friends, family, Facebook, social media. Like, you get on there and you think somebody posted something, you automatically think it's about you. It might have nothing to do about you. Miscommunication. Technology. Just a lot of things that are thrown at us every single day that we deal with. You turn on the news and there's, all this, not me, and the sexual harassment in the workplace. That, even if you're not a part of it, to watch it, it causes unrest to people. So it's just, you're exposed to a lot of things nowadays. So what are some additional causes? I like to call these the internal ones, the ones that we somewhat have control over. So stress, has anybody here ever been stressed?
No.
Yeah, we all feel it for various reasons, and sometimes it's higher than others. You know, sometimes we're going through personal things, sometimes we're at a point, and I don't know if I'm gonna slide ahead, so hold on a second. Where am I? Oh, I'm okay, okay. Yeah, okay, sorry. So, yeah, you know, who here hasn't gone through, you know, if you're going through a divorce, you're going through financial struggles, that causes outside stress. You have, you know, teenage children that you're trying to deal with, and, you know, they're running away or something bad's happening. Those are the types of things that, although we can somewhat control, it still affects us. So we've got to learn how to deal with those. So I call this my HR plug. We have the EAP, which is an employee assistance program that could help you if some of these things are going on. Obviously, there are, you know, toxic employees. But if we don't want it to get to the point where, you know, Nicole or any of the three Nicoles and I couldn't work together, you know, I've got to, if something's happening, I have to say something. Maybe Nicole's new to the work site, and, you know, I see her on her cell phone, and I don't say anything for a while, and, you know, but doesn't that give Nicole the idea and the precept that, oh, if it doesn't bother her, I'm just going to keep doing it. So if I don't say anything and say, hey, you know, Nicole, I don't have to be abrasive about it. I don't know if you know what the cell phone policy is here, or even if you don't want to bring up the cell phone policy, I can just say, hey, you know what, I need your help over here. Can you put that away for now? And, you know, or I'm sure what you're working on is important. There are plenty of ways to address it, but you got to address it early on, because if I wait 7 months and Nicole's been on her phone the whole time, yeah, and then there's an emergency, how angry am I? But maybe you had the expectation that it's okay the whole time. Now, we are adults, and we should know what isn't acceptable, but sometimes we do what we can get away with. If I have this stressful situation going on at home, and maybe I need to focus on my phone a little more because I don't know what's happening with my child at school because they're not showing up, or whatever. But we got to communicate, and we've got to make sure that we're still doing what we're here to do. So it's just making sure that we know these types of things. And I'm going to go back one slide, because I did get ahead of myself, because I think this is important. So when we talk about outside factors and things that are going on, I'm going to date myself here. You know, I remember, like, after, you know, dinner was done and everything was going on, you'd get ready to sit down and watch TV at like 8 o'clock. You know, my favorite was The Wonder Years, so I'd wait for it to come on and be like, oh, this is great. And, you know, if they kissed or even said darn or damn, you were like, whoa, I am watching an adult TV show. Like, you thought you were getting away with something at that point. Now you can turn on at, you know, go home from work, and at, you know, 6 o'clock, there's Sex in the City on. Sex in the City and The Wonder Years are two different things. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but what we're exposed to as a society and what our norms are have changed. And so growing up thinking that, I mean, you can say just about anything besides the F word on regular TV now, and yeah, it's a lot different. That you wouldn't see, like, sex scenes, you wouldn't see, it's just different things that we're exposed to, and we've got to, you know, take that into account, that our daily lives, we're exposed to a lot more, a lot faster, a lot more instant gratification than we ever used to be. So, you know, when you watch these reality TV shows like The Real Housewives of Atlanta or whatever, and they're together, but they're fist fighting each other, but they're supposed to work together, that's not acceptable behavior at work. We think it's funny, we watch it, but sometimes we don't know the lines between this is not acceptable and this is acceptable. And that's where I think we blur, we think we're funny, we get really friendly, and then there's just that line of civility that's crossed. And
we call it a reality show, so people think
it's true, or think it's okay. Some people think it's acceptable to call somebody an F&B, and then the next day it'll be okay to work together, because the next episode you see them shopping at the mall, and you think that there's no consequences to saying those things, or there's no perceived consequences, but there really are in real life. Nobody ever really rebounds from something like that. That's usually when I'm involved, or, you know, your manager's involved, and we're working through it. We don't want to get to there. There's no need to get to there. We're all here for the same goal. So we talked about this. We talked about the EAP. We don't want toxic employees. And if there are toxic, I get that this might not be the right field for everybody, but we need to identify that early on. A cell phone, that's something easily controlled. If somebody's just not happy working with the individuals we serve, we need to know that early on too, because we'll need to help them find a different place to be, a better fit. But we rely on you guys, because you're working together every single day. to start it here. I would want the benefit of the doubt. If I didn't, maybe at my last job, I could be on my cell phone. Maybe I could multitask. Maybe that was acceptable. Maybe I missed it in new hire orientation, or I came from a house where it seemed like it was okay there and nobody said anything. I want a coworker to give me the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, Amy, I would hate to have you get in trouble. We don't use our cell phones here. Again, I'm not saying you need to go up and be like, get off your phone. It's just a common courtesy. I think that's where we lose things at work. Don't we all want common courtesy? Don't we all want the benefit of the doubt? If we start practicing that at work, we're going to be so much better off. And it's going to be so much easier for you to do your daily jobs because people are going to give you the mutual respect back. It's warm up here.
It's
We're back here, yeah.
I'm gonna turn on one of the fans.
No, I'll get cold. No, we can if people are warm. Are you guys warm? I'll turn it on. Okay. Can you hear me over this fan? I can talk real All right, we'll turn it down just a little bit. We'll move it back here a little bit. Glad this is all on camera right now.
I forgot. That's
Just
funny.
the screen.
Just the screen.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare anybody. So why is this important? Because without civility, there would be chaos. We would be walking around calling people assholes at work and thinking that we could get away with it. But we can't, because it's not appropriate. Even if you want to say that, that's not the appropriate thing. I get that we get stressed out. I get that we want to have our moments. But we go home and we share that with our family members. And if it gets too bad, you got to share it with your manager to make sure it doesn't get to a point where we're just not having a bad day, that this is a repetitive, recurring thing. Civility holds moral implications. It holds us back from operating for an eye kind of behavior. And I like to say that this is important because, it's all too often that, okay, maybe if we go back to the example of the cell phone and, it's never come up, nothing's ever happened, and now I'm in a Justice Center investigation, again, something that probably really needed to be looked in, and maybe Nicole turned me in appropriately because I was doing something wrong and now it's being investigated. Well, in that process of the investigation, doesn't it come out that, well, I need to let you know about Nicole and how she's been on her phone? That's not okay. If something's happening, you got to report it before, because then there's all the buzzwords of retaliation and not taking care of things in the appropriate manner. So you want to make sure you're bringing issues up to the forefront, and I say bring them up to your coworkers first. Try to have an adult to adult, we're all adults here, conversation about working things out. If you do that once or twice, it's more than just a bad day. You need to go to your manager, because before it escalates and somebody we serve winds up having a Justice Center investigation, or something could have been prevented. That's what we're trying to do here. So, national incivility epidemics. This is some scary stuff to me, and it's true. We're exposed to this. Americans encounter incivility 17.1 times per week. That poor guy, if I had laid on my horn, he probably would have experienced incivility when I was yelling at him in my car until I had calmed down and said, hey, that's not okay. 2.4 times per day, 8 times 5 per week, face to face. Now it's funny that it's 8.6 times online, because I might be shy. I might not want to say to Diana right to her face something, but I'm certainly brave behind that firewall where I don't see her, or I just see her little profile picture and I want to say whatever, or a text where there's no picture, or there might be. So think about those types of things. And I just, I can't control what we're doing on a national level, but I want to be able to control what we're doing at work. I think we all deserve a respectful and polite workplace. We're all here for the same things. So this slide scares me on many levels, but the one that scares me the most is 26% of people have quit a job because of incivility. So what that says to me is, you know what, I gotta be doing my job right, because incivility is something that we can control. We all should be good to one another. We're all here on the same playing rules. Nobody's better, nobody's worse. We're all trying to get the individuals we serve the best lives that they can have, and we're all getting paid to do so. So we're really all here on the same playing field looking for the same things. So I don't know about you guys, but do you know that we have about 35 open positions here at CWI? Do you guys feel the burn when your coworker calls in, maybe because they're stressed out for even sometimes outside work reasons? So do you think that if we could control this number and keep 26% of our work staff from, rather than, why shouldn't we keep them? Because we're already down staffed and we already, are running thin, and maybe we can't do the outings that we need to do, or maybe we, are feeling the stress level or have to stay late and weren't able to pick up our child on time, because, this is a controllable thing, because we all just need to be nice to each other. The wrong employees will get out of here, but the right employees shouldn't have to leave for the wrong reasons. So I don't want anybody to not feel comfortable at work. So instability stats continued. I think I'm not ahead of myself. Yes. So again, 95% of us believe this is a major problem. 85% or 87% believe that uncivil behavior is a major contributor to the escalation of violent behavior in the U.S. And 70% believe that the internet is encouraging uncivil behavior. I personally agree with all of those, but what are we doing to stop it? So at work, we can control it. I'm asking you, we all have a job to do when we're here. If we do it and we try to work together the best that we can at least control not having an incivil workplace. Workplace incivility. So this is the one where we can control. This is the biggest one at CWI, where we have rude or discourteous behavior, or we get pockets of friends, or we're gossiping. And does anybody think it's incivil if Tanis and I are friends and we go to Zumba class and is it Jessica? Jamie, sorry. So if Tanis and I are friends and we go to Zumba, we all work at the same house, and Jamie comes in to release me, or both of the ladies come in to release me, but I tell Tanis everything that's happened in the house today. But I don't tell Jamie because I don't have that friendship relationship with her, I'm like, oh, Tanis will tell her, or she'll read it in the communication book. Is that okay? No, it's not okay. It's okay for Tanis and I to go do things after work and be friends, but it's not okay for me to treat a coworker any differently. We all need to be on the same playing ground. So I need to communicate with Tanis and Jamie that, hey, there was a behavior today, because I might be running out and I might have to go pick up somebody and they're just getting there on time. But I need to say, hey, guess what, guys? I need you to check the behavior logs or the communication logs, because there were 3, behaviors today that happened. So I didn't get to the dishes. I didn't get to this. Because does that help set the stage for a civil relationship? Rather than if Jamie goes to the dishwasher and she's like, oh, the dishwasher's not unloaded. Okay, she might give me a free pass because, who doesn't get busy? Oh, dinner's not prepared. What was Amy doing? Sitting around watching soaps all day? Do we all kind of put our own perceptions on them?
Oh, yeah.
If we just communicate that, and I'm not saying that I needed to give a 20-minute dissertation, but the courtesy, we live in a modern technology. I could text Tanis or Jamie, because there's a chance that we probably do have their numbers. If we don't, all I simply need to do is say, ladies, I need you to call the house manager or on call so you have a good idea of what happened here today, because it was really busy, the laundry didn't get done, some of the main important responsibilities didn't get done, rather than those ladies thinking, I just decided not to do my job responsibilities that day. So it's a communication, it's a two-way street. We want to make sure we're giving our coworkers the information that they need to be successful, but also the information that we would want. Wouldn't you want to know if you were walking into, oh, the dinner wasn't prepared and this was it? Like, you would just want to know that so you could prepare and get through the day. So I always say, treat others as you would want to be treated. So be the coworker that you want to work with. So if you want to work with a good coworker, make sure you're doing those same types of things, and that's how we're going to be in a better work environment. So it's not playing on, bud?
No.
So again, gossip. We don't need to be. I get that people have a bad day. I get that some people don't jive. Some personalities don't mix. Let's not gossip about them. You know what? Go home and tell the dog. Go home and tell your husband, because it's not going to infect the rest of CWI, and you can still get it off your chest. And I'm not saying. And you know what? Just make sure that you're communicating the appropriate things. You don't have to talk about Zumba. You don't have to talk about, going out. You don't have to talk about Christmas. You just need to communicate the important facts of doing their job successful and you being able to do your job successful. I'm just trying to make sure that we covered all these things. Sometimes people will think they're being funny and it's more like passive aggressive and they're liking to tell a joke. Make sure that you're not doing that. Or you can read people's faces. If somebody said something that was kind of insulting, make sure you don't say it again. Or, try to practice good manners, because I'll tell you what, anything that I think is funny, my husband automatically does not think is funny. So, like, if I try to tell a joke, he's not laughing. So, again, you know your audience, you know your gauge. We work with these people day in and day out. Just make sure you're being cognizant. What does incivility cost you in your workplace? Causes burnout. It causes people to call off if they're feeling stressed, and if Brooke felt like she couldn't work with me, and you know, is it right, is it wrong? We're not talking about that, but does that happen? So we've got to make sure that we're doing the best we can to preserve the workplace. You know, we don't need high turnover. We already have hard enough jobs as it is, so trying to do it while you're down-staffed is even worse. So let's try to do what we can to make sure we're keeping the right people here and we're doing the right things. And you know, it could cost you, like if you're feeling stressed out about it, it really takes a toll on you. So we want you to come to work. We want you to want to come to work. You know, we are happy that you chose us, and we want you to continue to choose us because we need you to do the hard jobs that you do every day. So restoring civility in the workplace. It begins with true leadership. And yes, it can start exactly at the top down, and it can start with me, and it can start with your managers, and it can start with directors. But I think it starts with yourself. Like the day that I had to own that I was in a bad mood because somebody cut me off, it wasn't that guy's fault. It was my fault. So it starts with me. Make sure that I'm being the coworker that I want to work with. So if I'm having a bad day or I get cut off, make sure that when I get to the door that I know that I owe the people we serve and my coworkers a decent day at work. And then you know what? When you get home, you can go back to being mad, or you can just try to change and be positive. And we all must consistently act with respect, restraint, and responsibility at work in all situations. And I know that sometimes that's easier said than done, but if we start getting angry, think about that. Say, okay, you know what, I'm going to step back before I confront, you know, April about it. You know what, I'm going to give myself a minute. I'm going to make sure that this is what I really want to say. Or I'm going to make sure that this is really a valuable arguing point. Because sometimes if we're having a bad day, something that wouldn't set us off, like some guy cutting me off, would trigger something. So just give yourself a second to reprocess. So top 10 tips for creating respect and civility in your workplace. Consider the impact of your words and actions on others. If you're doing good and you're trying to do good, there's a chance that that coworker is not going to quit or leave or call out and leave you in a bad spot. So thinking about that, making sure that you're being the best employee that you can be. And if it's still not working out, make sure you bring it to somebody's attention sooner rather than later before you get to the point where you feel like you can't work with that person anymore. Create an inclusive work environment, just what I was talking about. We don't all have to be friends, but we all have to communicate the points of doing our job and doing our job well. And so I like to, maybe I can summarize this slide with, okay, do you guys watch the NFL? Do you guys watch football? I only know enough to be dangerous, so we're all going to get along really well in this scenario, but it makes sense. So if we're all on the same team, and I won't even pick a team, we'll just call this team CWI. How about that? That's even better. So if I'm the quarterback, and you know April's the coach, and Diana's on the team, Tannis is on the team, all three Nicoles are on the team, and I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to make sure that I throw to the right Nicole. But if we're all on the team, and we all have a plan of how to get this ball to the end zone, okay, and we're looking for the touchdown, okay. So if we have that plan, and my plan is to throw to Diana, so we all do whatever, throw, kick, I don't know, sorry. But, so I'm ready, and I'm throwing to Diana. And all of a sudden I throw to Nicole? Does that leave Diana hanging? Like, what the heck's going on? Does that leave April, the coach, hanging? Like, what's going on? Does that leave the rest of the team like, what the hell is Amy trying to do here? What's happening? Maybe, you know, I didn't notice that Todd was coming at me, and I had to, like, redirect to make sure that I got the ball to somebody. But maybe these guys couldn't see it because there's a crowd of people on the field. But don't I recap after I got off the field to say, hey, Diana, I didn't mean to leave you hanging. This is what was happening. This is why I did it. That's how we have to function at work. We need to function like an NFL team or a team because we're all looking for that touchdown, the field goal at the end of the day, and that's what we're striving for. And we all got to communicate that and be on the same team and try to help. And if something goes wrong, we got to communicate it. So that's what I want you to think of you guys as. You know, I took responsibility for my actions that day in the car. I could have had a bad day, but I said, you know what, I'm going to own it, and then I'm going to be better from here. Self-awareness, I think that's the biggest one. If you permit it, you promote it. If we go back to, if I'm allowing a coworker to be on their phone, take 15 smoke breaks, do whatever, and I never ever say anything, who's part of the problem? And again, you don't have to, I'm not saying confront, I'm not saying be mean. Give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Just say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but, you know, I needed your help when you were on that last cigarette. Like, can we communicate about what you need or what I need? Can we make sure that we're making this work together? That's what we want to do. So here are the basics. Please, thank you, hello, goodbye. I really appreciate your time. I hope that you guys find this as simplistic as I can, and maybe even if you're not feeling it from other coworkers, if you start doing it, I feel like you're going to start getting it back. The last thing is there's a self-awareness quiz. Nobody's taking it, but I always like those little self-help quizzes in the magazine. Like, because you can say, wow, am I tolerant? Am I not tolerant? Did I think I was more tolerant than I was? It's just a little quiz. You don't have to turn it in. And hopefully it'll help you just have a brighter day. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. All right. Carl,
Yes.
are you up?
Yeah, if you can find it.
I think I can.
All right.
Compliance 2017 refresher?
Good.
Okay. And, oh, F5. Watch this. Todd, you ready? Woo. Oh, no, I gotta click on it first.
I'm not gonna help.
No, now I'm getting crazy. And,
There you go.
that. Give me around the legs. I know, I'm so excited.
Okay, before we get started, there's a number of people here who have not signed off on our information security policy. We adopted a new information security policy this year, and I think we have a list of names. April's got them, so I think she'll go around and pass it off. But there's an acknowledgement form that we need to collect, and we need to do that to comply with some of the regulations that we have to deal with this year. We're talking about corporate compliance. Every year we have a refresher. Again, it's a mandated course. It's required. Both the federal and state governments require that we certify each year that we have a compliance program in place and have held periodic refresher courses. So this is our annual refresher. And what we try to do is that each year there are things that may be new, things that have changed, so we try to update you on that, as well as remind you about some of the things that we're required to remind you about, and that's basically to be aware of things like fraud, waste, and abuse, HIPAA type issues, which again we have to comply with here because we're essentially dealing with protected health information. So this is what we do. Here we go. So again, compliance programs are in place for a specific reason. That's to make sure that we do things in accordance with all the applicable rules, regulations, policies, requirements, standards. We have federal and state standards to deal with from any number of different agencies, and as well as we have our own personal corporate policies in place that we have adopted here, that the board has adopted. So our objectives today, again, keep you informed about our corporate compliance program and issues, and remind you about our regulatory environment, particularly Medicaid, because again, that's about 90% of our revenue comes from Medicaid, and a lot of the requirements and rules we have are predicated on Medicaid rules. Again, false claims laws and your obligations. Everybody here should be concerned and know that fraud, waste, and abuse are things that we need to report on if we become aware of it. And again, we're going to be discussing and talking a little bit about HIPAA and information security. Okay, so what's new this year? How many of you are involved in electronic record keeping at this point? Because we're getting into that. We've got a number of programs that have started that.
Who's using tablets to enter their documentation in?
So we have a number of people doing that. Again, this is something new, and it requires that we be cognizant of the fact that with electronic recording we have some other obligations. We have different concerns that come up as opposed to dealing strictly with paper. Mobile devices, again, tablets people are using. Some people are going to be allowed to use their own personal devices, whether that's a smartphone or their own tablets, depending on what the circumstances are if you're out in the community. So again, those type of things create new issues. How do you protect that information? What do you do about it? How do you make sure that, you know, protected health information isn't available to people who shouldn't have access to it? And again, it just creates a whole host of new issues that we have to deal with. Information security policy updates. Part of the reason that we have instituted the WISP, the Written Information Security Policy, is because we did have to incorporate a number of new things in with our corporate compliance policies that we already had in place. So we've kind of consolidated them all in one big policy for you to read and hopefully take some issue with, but basically know that the main issue is security over the information that you have access to. And then IT software changes. Again, we have new systems in place. Our email has we used to have on individual servers is now up in the clouds. We have Office 365. All that stuff, again, has created issues for both us and our software supporters, Stored Tech, that we have to deal with. Okay, what's not new? Mentioned Medicaid compliance. That hasn't changed any. We may have some different ways of dealing with it, but we still have to comply with all those rules, the documentation rules, to make sure that we don't have issues with our auditors after the fact. HIPAA, again, HIPAA rules and regulations haven't changed any. General information security awareness, we've always been cognizant of that. The code of conduct hasn't changed any. We still need to comply with that, and we need to be aware of fraud, waste, and abuse, and know that it's our obligation, whether we see something that doesn't look right, or whether someone tells us that they're doing something that isn't appropriate, that you report that. DSRIP. What's DSRIP? All you need to know about this is that it is a program that is intended to provide managed care and incorporate within the healthcare community, the human services community, all those things in one big ball of managed care. And that's what we're working towards in this state. The DSRIP is an incentive payment system that's operated, and all you need to know is that we have Adirondack Health Institute is the lead on this, and we're part of a performer providing system, which essentially is all these different agencies are getting together and trying to figure out how we're going to do this managed care thing in the future. And so there are a number of programs, a number of people within the agency are dealing with the Adirondack Health Institute on certain programs. They have to comply with compliance program that Adirondack Health Institute has in place, and basically their compliance program is pretty much the same as ours. So again, but they have their own rules, they have their own policies in place, and anybody who is involved with Adirondack Health Institute through this performer providing system is going to have to also comply with their program. So they get, they get to look at these things more than we do. Information security policy, which I've talked about. Again, this addresses all the issues that we have related to security. It goes beyond HIPAA. So, we're talking about information that's particular, personally identifiable information. That relates to staff as well. So not just the people that we serve, information that the agency accumulates and possesses. Basically, what it deals with is just addressing how we take care of our electronic information, our physical information, accessing and storing it, and all those type of things. When we're talking information security, we're talking about some prohibitive activities. Again, some of it is no-brainer type things that we've discussed in the past. Passwords. We're talking about not revealing a password, making sure you institute all the security things that we have in place. You don't have to go overboard. Some people really take this thing seriously, and sometimes I think they go beyond what they need to do. And the other day I was going past somebody's office, and I heard them grumbling because they were changing their passwords. And they said, you know, I've got 4 passwords here I have to change. I've got the electronic software one, and I've got the one with my email and everything else, and it was taking him forever, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing. He must have the longest password in the world. And I said, you know, what's your problem here? And he said, well, it's just my password. You know, it takes forever. He's going, what? And I said, well, what's your password like? And he goes, well, this time it's Minnie, Mickey, Dewey, Huey, Louie, Donald, and Albany. And I said, that's you know, how do you even remember that? And he said, well, it requires 7 characters in a capital. And I think he didn't quite get the point of what he was trying to do, but in any event, you know, we just need to be aware of the fact that we have information security procedures in place because we need to protect the information that we have. Okay, so again, we're talking about prohibited things. You know, you don't send email that's not encrypted. You know, you don't post things on media websites, you know, Facebook, those type of things. You know, you have to be careful about, you know, if you're discussing somebody's care, you know, don't do it in the hallway where there's other people. If you have information on your computer, you know, make sure that that's not accessible to other people as well. Electronic records. Okay, we're into electronic record keeping, so everything is great now. We don't have to worry about losing paper and stuff. But we've just gotten to the point now where our residential programs and our day programs have split. They are strictly electronic record keeping now. So we should be good, right? Well, yes and no. And we've gone through, we've checked, we've looked at the documentation that's taking place electronically. And again, human error is still with us. You have to be careful about logging in. You have to be careful about what you're saying when you're reporting that. You shouldn't be inputting information into the system if you're not the one who's been providing the service. I mean, we found some of that where people say, "Oh, I'm just putting information into the electronic system for Joe because Joe told me what he did." Well, no, because then it shows up in the system that you performed that service and not Joe. So again, you have to be careful about what you're doing. The quality, again, you have to be careful about what you're saying. So some people are saying, "Well, it's, you know, I got to click this, and I have to get into this screen, then I have to e-sign it. I don't have time to write anything up." You know, I think sometimes you know, people need to be careful about what they write, and make sure that they do put some information in that gives people a sense of what you've been doing. And again, contemporaneous. If you don't get that information into the system on time, the system is not going to let you backdate it, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. But it's even more important now that you get it in because it's very clear when somebody puts a day's worth of services in 4 days later and then e-signs it a week later. So again, and HIPAA, again, is another factor that we just have to be careful and mindful of. Fraud, waste, and abuse. The federal and state false claims acts require that we mention them each year and your responsibilities for that. So again, what it boils down to, if something doesn't look right, you have some concerns, you just need to let us know about it. You can ask the questions that you have. You should be able to talk to your manager about it. If you don't feel that you're comfortable doing that, you can always contact us at Quality Assurance or Corporate Compliance. Our offices are over here in the clinic in the back corner. You can find us, so you can talk to us in person, or you can give us a phone call or email. Our expectations, again, are that everyone has been educated and trained to comply with laws, rules, and regulations we have in place. And these are basically the kind of things that we need to be aware of. Basically, all it boils down to is knowing the rules. If you don't know it, ask. If you have questions about any procedures, ask. Again, we talked about, you know, maybe following the chain of command normally, but you can always contact us directly if you need to. And all it boils down to is moving backwards here.
Oh, they don't want to stay longer. We can
No, I
run
know it.
backwards.
Well, I don't know what's happening here, but it's not.
There, we're done. So, any questions? All right, and we're going to get right into our compliance people, talking about incident, accident reporting, person-centered planning, and all that stuff.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
you're gonna have to do this section. Was that a true story, really?
Wait a minute.
Somewhere.
Provides by privacy policy.
Is this a sign? Well, it is a sign.
Oh, yeah.
Does it look like it?
Well, not really.
A sign and a color attached to it.
I've got one, yeah. She just gave us one.
Brooke, did you get one?
I did.
I handed a few out.
Huh?
A little.
Can we have a couple?
She made,
Oh.
she made
Well,
this
can I have one?
compliance.
Would you like some tough decisions?
Maybe you don't.
No, I don't.
I'm fine.
That's
Actually, we don't.
Are you the only one missing?
That's why.
Yeah, it's right.
She just.
No, we've got
But
plenty.
it's okay, she got everything, okay.
April, how many did you hand out?
And she'll be in this
Next
a
year,
couple, yeah,
Yeah.
before she expires.
okay, all right then.
There are two more if you want to hand. Sure.
Yeah, just say something.
They want to play too.
Oh, I like this one.
Oh, thank you.
Is this one positive?
Is there a beer there?
And the shot.
It's good to go for another fortune cookie.
Come on, let's switch. No, I got mine now. Cooking
You
with
got more and more.
beer and a shot.
All right, guys, we are in the home stretch here. I'm sure you're all ready to get out of here. This is an annual requirement that we go over. Everybody that's a new employee gets a new employee orientation. We also try to add some additional information to the mandatory abuse prevention incident reporting. The added touches that we've included in this year's session is a little information on rights and responsibilities, because in the world of person-centered planning, it's important not only for individuals to understand rights and responsibilities, but in order for them to understand, we also need to understand what they are. We also, through the series of the last year, through our DQI audits, that's from our survey team that comes from OPWDD, that looks at what we're doing and how we're delivering services and ensuring that we're in compliance with all of the thousands of regulations. We learn something new every year, and one of the main areas that they have been focusing on is human rights restrictions and how it's documented in a behavior support plan, which is how we actually deliver that service. So we wanted to include a portion of that as well. Okay, so we're going to start with abuse prevention. Here we have employees of the first line of defense to help prevent abuse from occurring. Can you guys think of some ways that you prevent abuse from occurring, or that you would prevent abuse from occurring?
Staff burnout, maybe offer someone an extra break if you notice that someone's overly stressed.
Perfect. Yep. How about reading plans? Being familiar with the individuals that we work with.
Bypass.
And review documentation often, because things do change. You may be out of work, you may have taken a vacation, and somebody may have choked while you were gone, and you got back and they have a new dining plan, but you think, oh, I worked with Joey for 12 years, I know what their food consistency needs to be. So make sure you're reviewing things often as well. So we're going to do a little activity. It says here, your support helps people to have more choice and control of their life, leading to a more meaningful life. So who has a blue card? Who would like to go first? Start with you?
I don't know what I'm doing.
Can you look
what
at your
is that?
card?
It's a cooking card with beer and shot.
That's how she interprets it.
That is not a beer can.
It's a Pepsi can.
Alright, it's a cooking card with a big Pepsi.
So
what does that mean to you? Is there something that we do with the individuals here at CWI that helps them lead a more meaningful life based on that card?
I don't know, because I'm respite.
You're rested.
Have you ever assisted the person or people you work with on
Cooking
learning how to
skills
cook?
or learning a new
Nope.
How many people in
activity?
here have? Because that's what somebody wants to do, is helping them learn a new task.
I work with a 5-year-old little girl, and she likes just starting to make sandwiches and stuff, so I really help her. Well, I don't help her, I just let her do a lot of it, and it's the biggest thing in the world to her. It's so cute. And it's just that doing that little thing makes the whole day, it seems like, can change your whole behavior.
Yeah. So what's on your card?
Make new friends.
And you do that by letting her make sandwich.
Yeah, if you go to the playground and I let her truly be herself. And I don't put any restrictions on it.
Good. Janet? The YMCA. So can you think of a way that we support individuals, maybe going to the YMCA or trying new activities?
Trying maybe just having
Your case wellness center, maybe?
Yeah, well, just having options available, because maybe it wouldn't occur to the individual to try
Swimming.
something, but having it available to try out in a safe environment.
Good. Diana?
I have tough decisions ahead.
What are some of those tough decisions that you sometimes have to help individuals make, Diana? And what if you didn't? How would that individual's day or week end if you didn't assist them through that decision-making process?
I think the most recent one was when 88 Broad was sold, and the Destination State program was forced with making a tough decision of, do they want to go to a different program? Do they want to stay together? How does that look?
Good example. Transportation?
So helping individuals learn how to take a bus or learn how to make a cab service so they can go to work on their own or go shopping or grocery shopping because that's not always helpful.
Yeah, and sometimes we have individuals who live in the community on their own, and they might need to go to the hospital or the clinic or the doctors in order for them to maintain or increase their independence. They rely upon public transportation. Does anybody else have a blue on the back? Eric? I gave that to you on purpose.
Jobs offered. So if an individual wants to learn new skills and eventually get a job, we help out find ways to have them learn the skills.
Give us an example of how you did this.
I worked with an individual that was going to program 5 days a week, and he wanted to learn job skills and eventually shift out of the program to get jobs and be in the community, so I set him up with a volunteering job at Saratoga Hospital.
Oh, cool.
And he works there 3 days a week at the hospital, and then he does volunteering at Treasures, their thrift shop. And now I was out for a little bit, but when I came back, I found out that he has a job ringing the bell. So now he has a paying job.
That's so cool.
And he shifted out of program.
That's really cool.
So, the message behind this, guys, is you're all doing things to promote people to have a more fulfilling, healthier, happier life. And as we can imagine, even in our everyday life, that when you're happier and you're feeling like you have that life that you're looking for, it leads to a more positive environment.
So to piggyback off from what April just said, these are some choices that we may help individuals with, but also choices that everyone else has the ability to choose. How to spend their money, make new friends, join clubs if they wish to, go to the YMCA, go to a concert, access the community. They have the choice of what they eat. Now we're going to get into abuse prevention. So the employee's responsibility is to protect from harm. So we need to stop and recognize abuse, show respect, protect people's rights, and demonstrate awareness of regulations and reporting requirements. So protecting individuals from harm, recognizing and stopping abuse, and then protect individuals from further danger or harm. So if we see an abusive situation, it's our job to step in, and stop the abuse from occurring. and then to protect the individual from further danger or harm. So sometimes, if you've ever been involved in an investigation, we talk about immediate protections. And some of those immediate protections that we have to put into place, maybe the staff is reassigned for the time being, or maybe they got injured and we need to call 911 or administer first aid. Another immediate protection that I can think of that we do often is provide the individuals with additional support, so it may be getting clinical services involved. Anything else?
Sometimes it's reassignment to a different location. Sometimes it's providing that first aid treatment right away to the individual or the staff person involved.
And number 3, report incidents and occurrences as they occur or are discovered. So immediately reporting. Things you can help control to maintain a healthy environment. Leave the personal matters at home and have a positive attitude. Like you said, you know, you go to work and you have a positive attitude, it can really make the day. I mean, if you walk in and you just have a nasty attitude, the individuals can pick up on that, and you can really have a difficult day based on your attitude. Review documentation often. We talked about that. Plans change. Make sure we're up to date. Know the people we're working with. So not just reading about them, getting to know them.
Can I just jump in for a
Yeah.
second? So when we're talking about reviewing documentation often, typically what happens is when you're first starting at a program, or maybe you're going to a new program, or you have a new individual, you read it then, but you might not read it again until like a year later or 6 months later when it's updated. It's really important because sometimes things change and you might not know it to review it, or sometimes we rely upon our coworkers to tell us, and that's how sometimes information gets skewed, and that's why it's important for you to read it and review it firsthand. Even if it's taking 10 minutes at the end of the day when everybody has gone to just kind of look over. Really, the safeguard sections are important in the behavior support plan. If you're working residentially in a certified program, the plan of protective oversight, those are the really important pieces to be looking at.
And if you have questions, ask your coworkers, ask your manager. Carl put it out there, if there's something that you need to come to QA or corporate compliance about, compliance officer.
And I don't want to leave Todd out because it includes him from transportation. Transportation gets from day programs what we call our snippets. So it's an overview of any medical or safety information that's important for the driver or the monitor to have to support that individual during transportation time.
And support your coworkers. If you recognize that they're going through a difficult, if they're having a difficult time, if there's been somebody that's been having a behavior all day and they've been struggling with them, you know, maybe give them a 10-minute break and say, hey, I'll take this for 10 minutes. And always be professional.
All right.
Cheers.
So some of the things that I'm going to talk about are redundant of what Jill had talked about already, so we won't go into great detail, but I really don't think we can talk about these things enough because, you know, day to day things get busy and sometimes we forget some of the little things that are important things. So some of us might think it's obvious what we're going to talk about, but sometimes it's not so obvious. So when there is a situation, whether you know if it's reportable to the Justice Center or not, it's important if you see an unsafe situation or you see a sensitive situation that just does not settle well with you. Doesn't matter what the definitions of abuse are or what the definitions of the different classifications are. If something doesn't settle well with you, it's time to intervene and speak up right away. As Jill mentioned, we want to immediately protect that individual or individuals from further harm. You want to, once you've gone through those pieces, that's when you want to immediately report it. If you're not sure if something should be reported to QA or to your supervisor, to me, that's pick up the phone and call. Don't wait because you know they're not on site that day or you're not sure when you're going to see them again. Reach to somebody. So I'm going to pick on Diana. If one of Diana's staff is not sure about something and she is at one of her other locations and they haven't been able to get a hold of her, it's important for them to reach out to another manager, their supervisor, Mark Armstrong, or if you can't get to them, then it's important to reach out to us immediately. 9 times out of 10, we are able to field those phone calls and guide you in the right directions. Sometimes we're reaching out to DQI or our incident management liaison to say, here's the situation, what do you think? Where would this fall? And then we'll get guidance from there. So you're reporting to your supervisor, you're reporting to QA, typically because whoever's reporting or involved in the situation, it's usually the manager reaching out to us most of the time because everybody else is busy taking care of the situation, but that's not, 100% the case all the time. And then we're going to say, did you call the Justice Center? If not, please call the Justice Center if it falls underneath the Justice Center provision. So for you, unless it happened in a certified setting, like you're going to a day program or a certified house, you would not report any of these things to the Justice Center. Same thing for you, Eric. But if you're picking an individual up at a day program and you witness something, we're going to be saying, hey, Eric, we need you to call this to the Justice Center. But because community have and employment aren't certified programs, those calls don't get made to the Justice Center, but we still have to, for the categories we're going to talk about, call them into our incident management at OPWD for Transit Connection. Because you're tied to a certified program such as they have, it still gets called into the Justice Center. So, and it's very important that you make that phone call to the Justice Center within a couple of hours of the situation happening so that all the proper protections can be put in place, and we have to let them know what it is as well. So, as we said before, reporting must be timely. So if you're not sure, and like I gave the example of, you're not sure when you're going to see your supervisor to ask them, pick up the phone and call. Sometimes there are situations where, a behavioral specialist might be reading a behavior intervention log and somebody might not have recognized that that was a reportable incident situation where we might be late reporting because of that. And those things happen. But the importance of reporting timely is because we are required when there is a true abusive situation to ensure that we're putting proper protections in place. So it might be, if it's an allegation of physical abuse or sexual abuse, we are required to ensure that that employee does not have any contact with any individuals we support at CWI. That needs to happen immediately. If it's psychological abuse or something along those lines, it's likely a reassignment with some additional training or somebody not left unsupervised during the time of the investigation time.
And just to go back to the physical or sexual abuse, law enforcement has to be called too.
All right. The next bullet is, when you're reporting these, being honest and truthful, and essentially what that means is when you're reporting situations, to only report what you personally saw and heard with your own two eyes and ears, because sometimes things can kind of get stretched in different ways, or it might be based off of hearsay, and it really misconstrues and convolutes the whole investigative process when we might be making a mountain out of a molehill because things got stretched a little bit. When we're making notifications to family members, we don't want to share any perceived reasons as to why something might have happened, who it involved, only what you personally saw and heard, and that they can reach out to QA with any questions that they might have. Confidentiality, anytime we're conducting an investigation, we have everybody sign off on a confidentiality statement. It's for everybody's best interest. When we're conducting investigations, it's not anybody's business but those parties who are involved, and nobody's going to know who reported what unless you're sharing it with each other. Cooperation with the investigation. It doesn't happen very often, but we're in the health and human service field for a reason, because we care, or we should at least. And sometimes we take it personal when these kinds of things happen. And when we're calling to set up interviews, or the manager's making a notification to the staff person involved, attitudes can flare up. That is only going to make the process more complicated. So we just ask for your patience and for your, understanding throughout the process. There's certain information we can share with you, and there's certain information we can't share with you throughout the process. What we can share with you, obviously we'll do that, And if there's ever any question, you can go on to the Justice Center's website and look to see what information is able to be shared with you if you're not, knowing what it is. Kind of going along with cooperation, confidentiality, honest and truthful. Sometimes it's gonna, and Amy touched upon this kind of stuff, sometimes it's gonna require you to possibly repair a relationship with one of your coworkers because maybe you saw something and you're doing what you should be doing by reporting it, but they took it personal, and it might include, a basic conversation between you and that person and your supervisor. It might be bringing HR into the mix to kind of mend that relationship. Failure to take action in itself could be viewed as obstruction. So if you are aware of a situation and don't report it, that could be an incident in itself. All right, so our internal investigative process, usually when there is an investigation, it's either Jill or I conducting the investigation. If we get super busy with investigations, we have a couple of backup investigators that are trained. Lisa Buckley, who is the community services manager, is a backup investigator. Obviously, if the investigation is based in community services, she wouldn't be doing that investigation. Sally Hawley is the Division Director of Employment Services. She's also a trained investigator. She would really only be able to do investigations that didn't involve community and employment services or service coordination. And then we have Mark Armstrong, who is also a backup investigator. He's our Division Director of Day Services, so he would be able to do investigations that did not involve the Day Services Division. There are times when there's an allegation of abuse and neglect that will go into the database system where that gets logged in once that call gets made to the Justice Center, where it has a J or it has an A next to it. If there is a J next to it, it means the Justice Center is conducting that investigation, and it doesn't go as quickly as when we're doing our own internal investigations because they have huge caseloads and they're working on improving that. So we have, from the time that the investigation was reported, we have 30 days to complete that process. Typically, we try to get it turned around in a 2 to 3 week period to report out. So if it is an allegation of abuse and neglect, we need to change the language in this. I just went to a training with the Justice Center, and they used to be called target letters. They changed the letter from a target letter / suspect letter to a subject letter. So it's a pre-scripted letter from us if we're conducting the investigation that says that you have been named as a subject in a abuse and neglect investigation. We'll give you the estimated date, location, that kind of thing. So that is only if it's an allegation of abuse and neglect. If it's significant incidents, mistreatment, or improper use of restraints, that doesn't go to the Justice Center. Only abuse and neglect situations go to the Justice Center.
So you just said misuse of restraints and stuff. That's not abuse?
It depends on what is communicated when that phone call is made.
Oh.
So typically speaking, it's labeled as a significant incident and is mistreatment, improper use of restraints. So it's not appropriate, but depending on what was done, if I tied your hands up so you couldn't go, then that would be, right.
Yeah. And it's not just mistreatment.
Right, we'll get to some examples of some of those other situations and you'll see the difference.
It just sucks that there has to even be a line that's drawn, or even a line that has to be drawn. It's crazy.
But that's kind of, as the ladies from Associates of Glens Falls talked earlier, something happened somewhere where,
it's like someone's life had to be the example. It sucks.
All right, so there's that piece of it. Then we set up interviews with all of the potential witnesses as well as anybody who was possibly involved. The interviews, we like to say that they're fact-finding processes. Like, up until then, we're not saying whether something did or did not occur. We have to have hardcore substantial evidence, and it could be physical evidence, it could be testimonial evidence that that situation did occur in order to either if it's abuse, neglect, it's substantiated or unsubstantiated. If it's a significant incident like conduct between individuals, improper use of restraints, then it's founded or unfounded. If we don't have the information that shows that that situation occurred, it's going to be unfounded. So once we have conducted all of our interviews, we have to put a report together for OPWDD and the Justice Center to submit that. Before we do that, we have to set up what we call a prelim, where we're reporting out to our Chief Operating Officer as well as the Division Director of where that situation occurred, so that they can hear firsthand everything that was involved in that situation. They review the whole file, which will include behavior intervention logs. It will include the person's ISP, their plan of protective oversight. It might include their MedEx checks. It might include staff training. It might include the sign-off sheets that Eric reviewed so-and-so's behavior support plan. It includes a lot of those details. Sometimes it includes, a Chronos printout to show who was working that day and time. If it had something to do with transit connection, it will include the snippet sheet as well to show what information was provided. Once that happens, along with the investigators as well as the people that we're reporting out to, we're required to put recommendations into place. It could be retraining, it could be updating somebody's safeguards, it could be updating their plan of protective oversight, it could be reassignment to a different location if necessary. It could just be simple notifications that it was unfounded, it was unsubstantiated. We do death investigations too, so if there's anybody who lives in our certified residences and they pass away unexpectedly on our time or expectedly, we have to conduct a death investigation. And one of the things that we like to tie into there, like when it truly shows that those staff person day in and day out knew that person and provided excellent care, we want to, that should be recognized every day anyways, but we also want to tie it into that process, because that is one of the most stressful investigations for those staff involved, is when it's a death and you have to worry about should we have done something differently. All right, where are we now? So once we do all of that, then we have to upload for abuse and neglect situations the entire investigation into IRMA and WSIR. You don't need to remember that, but we have all of these processes that we have to do. For abuse and neglect situations, we will report out to the staff person involved what our findings were before we get the official letter of determination from the Justice Center. And why do we do that? Because sometimes it could take 3 months before that letter of determination comes out. Sometimes it can take 4 months, and we do not want to leave a staff hanging. The only thing that we like to share with people is that was our finding. The Justice Center could come back with a different finding. We've had 2 situations in the last 6 months where we unsubstantiated a psychological abuse investigation. They agreed with our unsubstantiated psychological abuse, but came back and substantiated neglect, which we disagreed with, but there's not very much we can do. The employee that is involved in that situation has the right to appeal that decision and go to fair hearings if necessary. So sharing all of that with you, and again, all of that information and that process is on the Justice Center's website. Hopefully you won't need it. All right. So, when there is a substantiated allegation of abuse or neglect, so you get the letter of determination, it says it's substantiated or unsubstantiated. If it's substantiated, the Justice Center categorizes that allegation into 4 different categories. You'll get one of the 4. Number 1 being the most egregious, okay? So there was true harm and intent there. It involved, illegal dispensing of controlled substance, or we've heard in other agencies where staff have taken individuals' controlled substance. That would be deemed like a Category 1 obstruction of reports. So what does Category 1 mean? Essentially, that means if you were to leave CWI, you know, that day, shortly after, that if you were to go to another agency that falls underneath the auspices of the Justice Center, so Association for Mental Health falls under OMH, Office for Children and Families, OASIS, those kinds of agencies, if you were to go apply for a job there, they would not be able to hire you because you have a Category 1. Category 2 is obviously not as significant as Category 1, and there was some kind of proof in that investigation that staff seriously endangered the health, safety, and welfare of the individual involved. Essentially, the next level, and this is the only one that we have seen on any of our substantiations, is Category 3. So a Category 3 is, you know, that they didn't feel that it was serious jeopardy involved to the health and wellness of the individual. If you have I forget what it is, you have two Category 2s within a 3-year time period. I don't have my papers.
Yeah.
2 Category 2s in a 3-year time period, it jumps up to a Category 1.
And it's sealed after 5 years, so
Yeah.
it's just.
All of them are sealed, yeah. Category 4 is when, yes.
Does that mean if we have a Category 1, then after 5 years it's expired? Or what does that mean, it's sealed after 5 years?
You know,
For Categories 3s and 2s, they're sealed after 5 years.
What does sealed mean?
you're permanent if you get a Category 1, it's permanent.
So sealed means, like, say you had a Category 3 and you went to another provider such as CWI, I'll say AIM Services, and you apply for a job. They'll be able, if it's within a 5-year period, they'll be able to tell that you had a substantiated Category 3. If it's after that 5-year point, that does not show up in your record. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Category 4s aren't specifically tied to the staff person. It's based on the agency and a systematic issue, like we didn't have proper training and procedures in place. So, situations that we want to report. Some of them don't necessarily mean we're reporting them to the Justice Center, but just reporting them and filling out an INA, those kinds of things. So vehicle accidents. Every vehicle, you know, whether police are called, there's damage, or somebody's hurt or not hurt, we are required to report all vehicle accidents. Every vehicle should have that information in it on how to report that vehicle accident and the things that you should be doing. So if you're driving an agency vehicle and that is not in there, check it the next time you're in. Please let your manager know so that we can ensure that that information gets in the vehicles, because vehicles change a lot, things get switched out, so that's something that you can do. If you're not using an agency vehicle, which some of us don't, then you want to immediately report it to your supervisor so that they can guide you on the steps. Okay? Did you have another question?
No, that's just when I'm working with the individual though.
For the vehicle accidents, when we get to tickets, it's not just working when you're working with an individual.
Okay.
If you get a ticket, whether you're on work time or not on work time, it's still reportable to HR and your supervisor. Obviously, you guys know one of the required elements to be employed at CWI is to have a clean driving record. So that's why it's important to report it to HR on the next business day if you get a ticket on your own time, because you're only allowed to have up to a certain number of points. So we want to be proactive and get out there. So maybe you're close to that threshold. I don't know if you are, so maybe you're close to that threshold, and we want to be proactive. So the next time you get a ticket, you don't, lose your position here because we value you.
No, I drive below 78.
So we can recommend, why don't you sign up for defensive driving to get some of those points off your license. So that's one of the reasons. Yes?
Just to clarify, is it by the end of the next business day?
So if it's during work time, you want to report it immediately. If it's off work time, the next business day you would want to report that. So,
and is that at the point of when you're getting pulled over? Or that's not at the point of it goes to court and they decide what the ticket actually
Well,
is?
it's best, right, because it could change. So it's
Right.
best practice to, like, I remember getting pulled over one time and I called to just give a heads up that I got a ticket. It got reduced to parking on the pavement, but I wanted to get ahead of it and say, just so you know, this is what's happening. I'm going to court or I'm pleading guilty, you know, those kind of things, so.
You probably don't wanna do it as you're being pulled over, because then you'll get that whole using the cell phone while driving thing.
Alright, so this one seems like a common sense one. If an individual is missing, you wanna bring that to somebody's attention.
Was in the back seat just a moment ago.
But we also have some individuals who are highly independent and have alone time, who might live in one of our supported apartments or our IRAs, and maybe they didn't get home at the time that, you know, that was the cap. So we might say, did you do this, did you do that? And then if after all those things are completed and they're still not available, that's when we're calling law enforcement and we're calling OPWDD to let them know that those specific circumstances.
What's an IRA?
An IRA is a apartment where supervision is provided like 24/7 to the
all right.
individual. So, okay. Sorry, I'm talking in a language you don't know.
That's okay.
Let's see, where are we now? Choking. So, just for clarification, there's lots of different thoughts out there of, you know, if Debbie's over there and she takes a sip of her water and she starts coughing like for a good 10 minutes and her face is turning red, but she's still coughing, is she choking? Okay.
No.
Or I'm eating a potato chip and it goes down the wrong way and I got that tickle and I'm coughing quite a bit. I'm not able to have a conversation with Jill, but I'm able to cough. I'm not turning blue. It's not blocking my airways. Those situations are not choking situations. It's a swallowing situation, and you'll probably be doing clinic logs and that kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean that you needed to do CPR and those kinds of things. When, Heimlich, yes. So, yeah, so go back, remember to go back to your CPR first aid training of what those true signs are of choking, and that's when it becomes the difference of reporting it to the Justice Center and OPWDD and not. So if you're ever not sure, we have, you know, lots of people you can reach out to ask those questions. Injuries. So if I'm walking down the sidewalk, I fall, I skin my knee might be a little swollen. That isn't the injury that is reportable to OPWDD and the Justice Center. That's something that regardless, any kind of fall and that kind of stuff, we want to do our paperwork and complete a clinic log. So later on down the road, if something happens, we have that documentation. The only time that it becomes a true reportable to OPWDD is if the injury results in hospitalization or more than first aid treatment, meaning there's a positive finding for a fracture or they require stitches. Those are when it's a true investigation OPWDD situation. When you have something like that, you're like, why do you have to do an investigation? We just have to go through because we have to see, is there anything we could have done to prevent the situation from happening? Or, you know, is there something that individual needs that we didn't know about that should be implemented into their safeguards or plan of protective oversight? So those are the things when we're conducting investigations that we're trying to do. Anytime there's any missing money, and it doesn't necessarily, like you guys are like, what do you mean? So for day program and our residential settings, their individuals have personal funds, personal belongings on site. So if those end up missing and it's certain dollar amounts, we have to report it to OPWDD. If it's below that threshold, we still need to determine and return and reimburse that individual for those items and see, you know, do we have, you know, somebody that is pocket picking or, you know, any of those kind of things. Restraints that don't have proper approval, that aren't in the person's behavior support plan, as well as on the doctor's order. So anytime, and we'll get to this, anytime a person has restraints, whether it's, you know, a chemical restraint, physical restraints, we need to ensure that we have all the proper approvals for those in order to utilize them, and we'll get into a deeper discussion about that in a little while. Any suspected abuse and neglect, so hitting, kicking, slapping, punching, fighting, any of the sexual, you know, abuse kinds of things, we want to make sure that they're being reported. Conduct between individuals, so to really give you, without going into great detail, what that means, conduct between individuals, we have 2 individuals receiving services, and, you know, it's Jill and I have a behavior support plan that says that I have the tendency to get assaulted with other people, and today's one of those days, and I walk up and just nail Jill. She doesn't have any injuries that require more than first aid. It's in my behavior support plan. It's already being addressed. The team is aware of that. That would not be reportable to the Justice Center. You're still going to do your behavior intervention logs. You're still going to have that team discussion. We're going to look at, like, what should we be doing? Am I targeting just Jill all the time? Do we need to look at, like, locations of people? Where it becomes reportable, and I'll share this example. We had in one of our residential settings, an individual from one of the other apartments was going with a staff person to pick up somebody else at the mall. That staff person wasn't expecting that, or that individual that was at the mall wasn't expecting that individual to be in the vehicle. He came out of the mall, opened up the van door, saw that individual sitting in there, and just started railing on him. That was not in his behavior support plan. It was out of the ordinary. That was conduct between individuals. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Use of timeout rooms, aversive conditioning. We don't do that here. I can't, you know, put you in a cold environment because I know you'll act a certain way or have a certain behavior because of it. I always use the example of, has anybody ever seen, like, you know, you spray your cat with a spray bottle to, you know, obviously with our individuals and depending on what training, like, you should not be doing that. Med errors with adverse effects or unlawfully using a controlled substance. So all med errors are reportable. And you guys don't have, you don't pass meds, but for our programs that do, they're all reportable to your manager and to the nursing staff. The only time it becomes a reportable incident to OPWDD is when it has had a negative impact on the individual. So they got somebody else's medication, they got too much of their medication and they ended up in the hospital as a result, or they got sick as a result. That would make it a reportable situation.
But if they get the wrong meds and they're happy, it's okay.
As long as it doesn't have that.
As long as it's not a controlled substance.
Right. But if I take...
Well, if they're happy, then it's okay.
Yeah, no negative effects.
Still reportable.
I mean, I don't have to worry about
But
that,
it's
but
still
just...
reportable.
Yes,
But
yes.
the manager would then report that to you, though, even if you don't report it.
Well, not
So-and-so's
not
extremely
to
happy
nursing
today.
staff.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so staff, and I want to stress deliberately and purposefully not following a behavior plan or rehabilitation plan or nursing care plan. Those are all plans that are incorporated into most of our individuals' day-to-day activities. And if somebody flat out just is not following it, not because they don't understand it or not because, you know, somebody didn't review it because they just chose not to, you know.
What if you just mix them up?
They were being incivil in the workplace, you know, having one of those days. Staff placing an individual in a place where they can't get out of, and deaths. Sorry, I'm trying to push this as quick as possible. So we thought it'd be helpful for you guys to see some statistics, not a ton, but just some basic overview of statistics of 2016, our allegations of abuse and neglect. So even though we don't like to have any on here, the numbers are pretty impressive, considering the number of individuals we serve in the day-to-day activities. For allegations of physical abuse, we had in 2016 a total of 4 allegations of physical abuse, which none of them were substantiated, which is great news. We had 4 allegations of neglect. Out of those 4, 3 of them were found to have happened. Psychological abuse, there was 1 which was substantiated. And in that instance, given the circumstances, that staff was relieved from their duties here at CWI. This is our biggest category of situations. So we had a total of 13 mistreatment allegations in 2016, and 6 out of 13 of them were found to have happened. Conduct between individuals. This was before we had clarification from the state on what it really constituted, that just walking by Sue and doing that to her, like at that time, like we were calling everything in, but we got that further clarification. So at that time, all 13 were deemed to have occurred. Inappropriate use of restraints, 6 out of 8 were founded. Choking with no known risk, there were 3 of them reported, only 1 had occurred. Choking with known risk, there were 3 and only 1 was found to have happened. So that's why we kind of wanted to do that discussion of, like, you know, just because I'm coughing for 10 minutes and my face is turning beet red doesn't necessarily mean that it's a choking situation.
So now we're going to get into rights, understanding rights. All people are free to exercise their rights without restrictions or interference from others, but people must know what their rights are before they can use them. So the next slide shows an example of rights. They have the right to choose their friends, they have the right to spend their money, to eat fast food if they choose to, the right to get married. So all the rights that we have, the individuals that we work with have as well. Supporting individuals' rights and responsibilities. Staff play a key role. We help explain and help them understand the various rights and responsibilities, explain the natural consequences. So yes, they have the right to do whatever they choose, but our responsibility is to help explain what the natural consequences might be of their choice, provide ongoing education regarding topics of interest to the person, and provide support as these individuals go through these life experiences. You're responsible for your own behavior, so with rights comes responsibilities. You're responsible for respecting others' property and personal belongings. They're expected to be courteous, cooperative, and responsible, to maintain safety at all times, and responsible for any behavior that may be harmful to themselves or to others. There are rights, I don't know if you can hold one up for me, Eric. Brochures back there, so if you guys want to take one before you leave, if you have not taken one already, and help educate the individuals we work with on their rights. Next, we're going to get into your restrictions.
Right, so this is what we were talking about earlier, and we'll try to speed this up a little bit, guys, and like anything else, if you have a question about something, don't ever hesitate to reach out. So everybody, there's human rights restrictions for the individuals that we support, and essentially it's anything that limits and prevents that individual from freely exercising his or her rights and privileges. So think about, like, when you're wondering if something is a rights restriction, think about if this happened to you, if it felt like you were being denied something, and most likely it's a rights restriction for that individual.
So who has a red card?
Right, so Debbie, hold your card up, and what do you think that is?
Well, if it is a skip move, it's being done wrongly.
So it is, that's our picture for physical interventions.
Okay.
They are rights restrictions. So we have to have proper approval, they need to be in behavior support plans. The only time that we don't need to have proper approval if something is not in a behavior support plan is if it's an emergency situation where, and I picked on Diana last month in a different training, we had an individual who didn't have physical interventions in his behavior support plan, but he went to go attack one of his peers, and the staff person did what they should have and, you know, stepped up behind him and held him back so that he did not physically harm that individual. That was an emergency situation and was not a reportable situation because he was going to be a harm to himself or, in this instance, somebody else. All right.
Who else has a card?
Go ahead, Todd.
I have a seatbelt, also known as a restraint.
So anytime a individual is not able to remove something by themselves, that is where it could become a rights restriction. If it's like a rear latching seatbelt and the individual can't get to it because, you know, they are going to be a harm to themselves or others, that is a mechanical restraint. If a seatbelt is used for, there's no behaviors tied to it, it's just for safety and medical purposes, and the doctor's order reads that way, that it's for positioning during transportation or safety during transportation, that does not need to go through the human rights approval process. We still have to have informed consent, and we still have to have the doctor's order and make sure that those get updated, but it doesn't have to go through the human rights process or be in a behavior support plan if it's for health and safety.
For a keypad line?
Sorry, what?
Oh, that's okay. It's a refrigerator with locks on it. Looks like the one in my old lab with blood in it, but it says biohazard.
Well, that was just there.
Oh, I was like, that's very confusing. Should I not like it?
So refrigerators or cupboards, we can't be locking up refrigerators or cupboards that individuals should be able to freely access them to. That would be a rights restriction.
And you had one, there's one more, telephone.
What do you think that is, Nicole?
They have the right to use the phone?
Yeah, we can't tell them that they can't use the phone after 5 o'clock. We don't have the right to tell them they can't use the phone. Sometimes there are individuals that are under our care, sometimes in day services, mostly in residential, where they might have a court order that they need to be provided extra oversight when using the telephone because maybe they've gotten in trouble with the law and there's a restraining order that says like no contact. And that's where we would need to have that documentation to support it. It need to be spelled out in the behavior support plan. If it was court ordered, you know, having the paperwork from the probation department to kind of go along with that. All right, so here are some other common rights restrictions that we see here at CWI. Physical and mechanical restraints, like brakes on wheelchairs are technically mechanical restraints. So I can't just go up and put somebody's wheelchair brakes on for the purpose of like, you know, my own not needing to have to worry about supervising them at that time. GPS tracking bracelets, that is another one. Door and window alarms, use of psychotropic medications, as well as if we're trying to control how somebody spends their money. We might think that we want to help, you know, them save, but unless there's a specific reason or, you know, it's gone through the human rights process and we have all those proper approvals, we can't tell somebody, no, you can't buy that. Smoking reduction practices, caffeine intake, you know, whether or not, you know, okay, it's Sunday night, you're not allowed to have visitors to the house after 7 p.m. Again, we can't implement these blanket rules. Telephone access or other electronics use, so computer, internet, that kind of stuff. And then access to food. There have been, you know, situations where we're like, that's not a good decision, you can't have it. Well, if they have a goal and we're trying to support them to make healthier decisions and they still choose to not follow that, they can have it, you know. And it, yes, so. All right, so CWI's human rights process. In order for rights restrictions to be implemented, we have a human rights committee that everything in all other agencies like ours do, that all of this stuff has to be funneled through. So we have to have a justification for the restriction. It could be a court order, it could be probation guidelines, it could be, you guys, how many people in here fill out behavior intervention logs, clinic logs, tracking sheets, all of those documentations are justification as to why these pieces need to be in order still. A year from now, if there's no, you know, say last year there were 25 instances, this year there's 1, they're going to say, is it really necessary? You need to have that justification to continue these restrictions. We also need to have proof that less restrictive interventions have been tried and have been unsuccessful. Again, those would be documented on all of those forms that I was talking to you about. A detailed plan outlining the restriction, including a fading criteria. You don't always want this restriction to be in place. Just because when I was 16 years old, I made a really stupid decision, doesn't mean that that should be held against me when I'm 37 years old. So there should be some goal for fading that criteria, or fading that restriction out. The detailed plan is 9 times out of 10, if it involves behaviors, is the behavior support plan. Sometimes if it's medical and safety related, it might be the safeguards in a day hab plan, or it might be a nursing care plan as well. in order for any of these pieces to occur, we need to have informed consent, which that is the authorization from if the individual is their own consentee, that they say, yes, you know, I agree to this. They can say no, and we won't be able to put these restrictions in place unless it's court ordered. That's a different story. If the individual is not consenting and they have, you know, a family member that consents for them, they would be the person consenting for it. If they don't have anybody involved in their lives and they aren't consenting themselves, then it goes to CWI's Informed Consent Committee to make that decision on their behalf. And that's separate from the Human Rights Committee. So the ABS, once they have the informed consent and all of these other pieces together, the behavioral specialist presents this information to the Human Rights Committee. The Human Rights Committee meets on a monthly basis. Sometimes there's emergency requests that come in between meetings that are approved via email and communication over the telephone. The committee will either approve or disapprove. Usually if they disapprove, it's because that documentation isn't there to provide that it warrants these rights restrictions, or maybe it's something needs to be updated in the plan to meet all of the regulatory requirements. Once it's approved, then it is the ABS's responsibility to train and update all of the program providers involved in it. So, let's see. And then obviously the ongoing documentation is required. All right, so we kept you about 10 minutes after the planned time. Okay, I'm gonna blame it on Amy. So, do you guys have any questions about anything that we talked about? Hopefully you're comfortable if something comes to your mind when you leave here. You're like, I'm not sure about this. Is that what they were talking about? That you connect with your supervisor on it, or give Jill and I a phone call.